Hey everybody, it's Scott Shetler here at Extreme Performance Training Systems in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about some of the exercises that we use for shoulder health. A lot of the people that I work with, if we're talking about the athletes, a lot of the grapplers and the combat athletes have beat up shoulders from the different, joint locks and manipulations that they do in their training. The football players, the shoulders get beat up from constantly hitting. When they're playing the game, when they're practicing, when they're hitting tackling dummies and things like that, just that years and years of constant, banging away have beat up the shoulders pretty bad. I've got a lot of people that I train, just general health and fitness enthusiasts who have shoulder issues, whether it's from poor posture, lack of proper training and things like that. And then, of course, with the power lifters that we have in here, from holding heavy bars on their shoulders and from heavy benches, over time can lead to some shoulder discomfort, pain, and sometimes injuries that require surgery. So we do place a lot of emphasis on shoulder health. We place a lot of emphasis on pre-hab versus rehab. Of course, we want to try to avoid having surgery as much as possible. Inevitably, sometimes the injury gets really, really bad, and some people do need to get surgery. And these strategies would work really well too for kind of a post-surgery type of setting too, of course, after you've been cleared by your doctor, you've gone through your appropriate therapy and stuff. But these exercises that I want to talk about today and kind of give a little demo of, we found to be really good as far as strengthening up the shoulders, as far as providing a little bit of prehab for the shoulders, and just focusing on shoulder health in general. There's a lot of exercises out there that you could do. These just tend to be three of the ones that make their way into our rotation quite a bit for most of our athletes. So the first one that I want to look at is the bench press with the Bandbell bar. The bar that we have is the Earthquake bar made by Bandbell. It's a bamboo bar that you suspend weights from with bands, and it kind of vibrates when you're benching so that it creates maximum muscular contractions during the exercise. Because the bar's shaking, you really have to stabilize the muscles around the shoulders. You've got to lock in the upper back and get really, really tight. So not only have we found this exercise to be great for shoulder health, but for a lot of people that have issues with their groove in the bench press, this has really helped improve the bench from the standpoint that they're activating more of their upper body muscle that's required to perform the lift. The second exercise that I want to look at today is something that I learned from Dr. Ed Thomas when he was at my gym a few years ago. He was doing a bunch of Indian club work with us, as well as some inversion training and things like that. Dr. Thomas is a huge proponent of kind of healthy or restorative based exercises. He always likes to say that fitness shouldn't hurt. One of the things that I learned from him, in addition to the Indian clubs, was a shoulder exercise that he showed me with dumbbells. And basically, I've just called it a circle lateral raise. I really don't know if there's an appropriate name for it or whatnot. I just liked it a lot. I started training it myself, then I started working it into the rotations of my athletes and clients. So we've got that exercise that we do with dumbbells, and then some of the basic club swinging patterns, which I think club swinging is one of the best things that you can do for shoulder health. And I'm talking about the smaller Indian clubs. We also use the larger clubs here too. One of my favorites is the ADX adjustable club for two-handed and heavier swings. But one of the better things that I think can be done for shoulder health is to use the small clubs for some of the circular exercises. So I just want to demo a few of the exercises that we use regularly here. So those are the three movements that I want to take a look at and provide a brief little demo. And one of the things, I just encourage all of you, whether you've got shoulder issues or not, to try to work some shoulder health work into your training program, because it's kind of ridiculous to wait until you do have an issue with your shoulder before you start adding in some exercises to make the shoulders healthy. If you think it's common for people to spend a lot of time bench pressing, and they develop a lot of strength and tension on the front side of the shoulder. It affects the posture by rolling the shoulders forward. It can cause some sort of forward head posture and different things when you don't do any muscles, any exercises for the muscles of the upper back, like some rows, some external rotation and things like that. So if you just start working predominantly in one plane of movement and in one movement pattern, you're setting yourself up for imbalances. And I know a lot of people who do nothing but bench press, or even from a powerlifting standpoint, they just stick with the main lifts, the squat, bench, and deadlift, and they don't incorporate a lot of upper back work, and they don't incorporate a lot of external rotation work, which I personally think is a mistake. So it doesn't require a lot of time. A lot of these kind of prehab movements, or a lot of these exercises that we do for just general health will maybe occupy about 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning or end of a workout. Or often what I do is I add them in on as extra workouts, either earlier or later in a day that we're doing one of our main workouts or in one of our off days. So typically what we do here is we do 4 main workouts each week, 2 dedicated to the lower body and 2 dedicated to the upper body, where we do our primary lifts that we're working on the day that we're trying to build, and then we do all the accessory and supplementary work to build those lifts in those 4 main workouts. And then a few times during the week, usually about 4, maybe 6 days. I usually do something every day, but we work in some smaller workouts where we're doing some more accessory exercises. We're working on weak points. We might be doing some conditioning work. We might be doing some flexibility or mobility. What I found is that as I've gotten older, I'm going to be turning 42 this year. I hurt my shoulder a few years back when I was competing in kettlebell sport. This was back in 2013, I think, 2012 or 2013. I was training for a competition down in Florida, and when I was locking out a jerk, my something tweaked in my shoulder, and then it just was never the same. I was actually able to go compete and continue training, and I didn't really have to take any time off, but it forced me to work around that injury quite a bit. And this was actually back then I was doing a little bit of club swinging and some of the dumbbell movements, but we hadn't gotten our bamboo bar yet and things like that. So I really feel the inclusion of the bamboo bar has made a huge difference in the way that my shoulders have felt. But what I found is as I've gotten older that I need to do more work to keep my joints feeling better, to help with recovery and things like that, not less work. So I'm doing something generally every day, and usually a couple times a day, because I really like to train. I enjoy training, but that doesn't mean that every single time I'm exercising or working out that I'm pushing really hard, that I'm doing a ton of volume, or that I'm going to failure. All these light and extra workouts, they really don't tap into my recovery ability. In fact, what they do is they usually promote restoration and recovery. So like yesterday, we did a dynamic effort bench press workout. So today, I do upper body exercises. Maybe if my chest is a little bit sore, I might do some light dumbbell bench presses. I might do some, a few light sets of push-ups. Nothing to failure, nothing with a huge heavy weight. I might do the Bandbell bar bench press. I might do some exercises that I didn't really get to spend a lot of time on during a workout yesterday. So if I feel like I need a little bit more tricep work, or if I need a little bit more lateral upper back work, I may go ahead and do that today. And I rotate exercises in my accessory work and my small mini workouts that I do throughout the week, just like we do on our main workouts. So we do have a lot of exercises that we work in and out, and that's usually how I work those extra exercises and those extra workouts into my weekly training. And that's how a lot of the lifters and athletes that I train do it. When people are coming here for just, say, powerlifting, for instance, they're not competing in another sport. So in addition to the 4 main movements, which is like specific training for their sport, they're doing the squat, bench, and deadlift. The extra workouts are for their general physical preparation. They're to help strengthen weak points and such. Now, if you talk about like a more general athlete, like a football player, a tennis player, volleyball player, some of the other athletes that I train, they've got all their sport practice, they've got their conditioning, they've got their hitting drills, they've got so many other things that they have to do that pertain to their sport. They don't need to do a bunch of extra workouts and things like that to enhance their development, because their physical training in here is their general physical training for the specificity required for their sport or their event. So a lot of this stuff is goal-based. It's driven by what it is that you're participating in, whether it's just general health and fitness, or whether it's more directed toward an activity, competition, or a sport that you're training for. So it's kind of a long way of saying we work a lot of these extra exercises in quite a bit during the week, and it doesn't require a lot of time. Like I said, 5 or 10 minutes at the end or prior to a workout, or during the week as its own extra workout. Those workouts usually take us anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 minutes to do. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and demo these 3 exercises that have found their way into our program quite a bit here. Again, we're going to start with the bench press on the Bandbell bar. And then I'm going to move to the circle lateral raise exercise that I learned from Dr. Ed Thomas. And then we're going to move to some club swinging patterns that we use regularly for shoulder health. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. Again, first we're going to look at the bench press with the Bandbell bar. Now, like I said, the Bandbell bar that we have is the model is the earthquake bar. The bar is made out of bamboo, so it's very light and it's flexible. And with the weights, we use kettlebells or weight plates suspended by bands from the bar to load resistance onto the bar. And as you start benching, that weight's going to start jumping around a little bit, and it's going to cause that bar to vibrate. You're going to have to tighten up all the muscles in the upper body. You're going to have to groove a little bit better path, and it's going to work all the smaller muscles around the shoulders. So I'm going to go ahead and demo some of the demo a few reps in the exercise here so you can see how it works. You can see just unracking it, the bar's shaking already. So with the Bandbell bar bench press, you can definitely see how there's an element of stability required just to do the exercise. So what I found was that my lats, my shoulders are getting really tight, and it's helping me reinforce my setup. But then as that bar's jumping around, you're having to tighten all of your upper body muscles to keep that bar in a good path. So like I said, in addition to making the shoulders stronger and healthier, it also really helps to groove your bar path in the bench press. So let's take a look at the second exercise, which is the circle lateral raise. Again, this is one that I learned from Dr. Ed Thomas of MotionRx.com. He's probably most well known for the work he does with Indian clubs, but he showed me this exercise and it totally trashed my shoulders in a good way. So what you're going to do is start out with a light pair of dumbbells. You're going to begin by raising the dumbbells palms facing each other, and then as the weights start to go overhead, you're going to rotate your palms out so that when you lower the weights to the side, the palms are facing down. So raise the weights up with the palms facing each other. Begin to rotate the palms out so they're facing down, and then lower as if you're doing a side raise. So it starts with a front raise, circles up overhead, the palms face out, and then you lower the weights down to the side. So let's take a look at it from the side here. Raise the weights up, palms facing each other, rotate the palms out, and lower the weights down to the side. Do a couple more reps here from the front. So with the circle lateral raise, you'll definitely want to use a little bit lighter weight to get familiar with the exercise, but it doesn't take a lot of weight to feel that one. The first time I did it, he had asked me what I use for lateral raises. I said usually about 20 or 25s, so he said grab 15s, and I could barely do the exercise with good control with the 15s. So I dropped down to 10s, and I usually use anywhere between 10 and 15 pounds now for that. It doesn't take much. But what I found was, in addition to building strength in the shoulder, because you're working a partial circumduction. It's kind of like Indian club training where you're able to rotate the shoulders versus just doing a lateral raise or a front raise or a shoulder press, which is nothing wrong with those exercises. But again, when we're talking about exercise that we can use for shoulder health and some of these kind of pre-hab movements where we're just focused on bringing a little bit of health to the joint or working a little bit of extra movement maybe to the rear, which is something that people who bench press or people that do a lot of internal rotation like throwers or freestyle swimmers can really benefit from. We want to go a little bit lighter, use higher reps, and again with that exercise, you start with the palms facing each other, then as the weights come up overhead, the palms begin to rotate out, and then when you lower the weights to the side, the palms are facing down. So you're circling, you're raising to the front, circling out to the side, and then lowering down. And like I said, in addition to the shoulders, I found that it really hits the traps in the upper back as well as the posterior deltoid really, really well. So it's just a good exercise to include for shoulder strength and health. And I usually use that one toward the end of the workout when I'm training my shoulders, or like I said, as an extra workout maybe the day after some heavy upper body training. So the last movement that I want to look at is some of the various club swinging that I do with the lighter Indian clubs. Typically we use 1, 2, or 3 pound clubs for these exercises. What we're going to look at today is just a basic forward rotation, a backward rotation, and then some of the internal and external rotation patterns that we use regularly with our club training. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. And again, this is something that I learned from Dr. Thomas when he was down here in Atlanta, and got the pleasure of training with him at the gym. So to begin with, you want to hold the club with a closed grip down at the end of the club. So what you see is the little knob at the end of the club. You're going to wrap your pinky over top that, and then the rest of the hand in a closed grip on the handle of the club. Now, an open grip is when we're extending the club during a swing, usually point one finger down the handle so that the club becomes more of an extension of the arm. So those are the two grips that we use in most of these club swinging patterns. The two patterns that I want to demonstrate today are just the forward rotations and the backward rotations. This is something that's very simple to do. Anybody can do it. You just grab a set of clubs, and this is really great for loosening and opening up the shoulders. So you just swing the clubs to the front overhead, allowing the club to pull on the shoulder using some of that centrifugal force that's being created with the movement so that you get a little bit of traction. The club's kind of pulling on the shoulder as it's swinging around. So you get a little bit of distraction in the joint as it's circumducting through the range of motion. So again, this is fantastic for shoulder strength and health. So we're just doing the circles to the front, and then we can reverse that and do circles to the back. And this is just something simple. It requires no skill, just a pair of clubs, and you're basically doing front and back shoulder rotations. Now, one of the more advanced patterns that's pretty easy to learn is some of the internal and external rotations that we do with the clubs. This is great for the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder. The internal pattern, you just swing the club up, or excuse me, this is the external pattern. You swing the club up almost like you're punching your chin. From there, you swing your elbow out to the side, you extend the club out to the side, and then let the club swing the arm back down to the starting position. So you see the head of the club drops back behind the shoulder and creates that circular pattern. And again, we're allowing the club to pull and distract the shoulder. As we build a little bit of speed and momentum, you really feel a lot of distraction in the joint. Again, fantastic for strength and health of the shoulder. So that's the external rotation pattern. The internal rotation pattern is just the opposite of that. So we're starting here. We shoot the club out to the side, opening the grip. Let the club pendulum down and up to the side. From here, we bend the elbow, point the club back behind the head, and then we swing the elbow across the body, dropping the club down into the next rotation. And you see once you get going, you've got that circular pattern that's created when the club head drops behind the shoulder. So this is the internal rotation pattern that we do with the Indian club swinging. And it can be done single, as I just demonstrated. It can be done with two clubs mirroring each other. So if we look at the external rotation pattern, you're just coming up, out, and down. And then if we look at the internal rotation pattern, with the clubs done simultaneously. So that's a second way that pattern can be performed, or these two patterns can be performed. And a third way is instead of mirroring each other like this, we kind of separate them by about 180 degrees. So with the the external rotation pattern, we're sending one arm out while the other's coming up. And then the internal rotation pattern, done exactly the same way, one arm at a time. And this is just a little bit more advanced, requires just a little bit more coordination and timing, but that's also a good progression that we usually work when we start training with the clubs. Is we start with the single arm external swinging patterns, the single arm internal swinging patterns, then we go to the doubles where we're mirroring the movements, and then we go to the doubles where we're separating the movements like so. So that's the third exercise. Again, there's many other club swinging patterns that we utilize here, but the internal and external rotations as well as the forward and backward shoulder rotations are the ones that we use predominantly because they're pretty simple to learn. They're also very effective. So that's it for this week's episode. Hopefully this gave you some ideas on some different things that you can begin including in addition to your training program. I think one thing that's really important to remember is that when you're building your training program, that it's not just about adding and adding and adding. Sometimes you got to take some stuff out too. One of the biggest traps that you can get caught in is you see something that's really cool or you see something that feels good. Don't just start piling up things on top of each other. Sometimes you might have to back some stuff out to make room for some other things that are working for you at that moment. So if you're dealing with a little bit of shoulder pain, shift gears a little bit in your program. It doesn't mean stop training for strength. It doesn't mean stop, trying to improve, but shift the gear so that you're focused a little bit more on fixing the shoulders so that you can move on and get stronger. So that might mean backing off a little bit on the bench press intensity or the squat intensity, getting the bar off your back. Maybe you do some things like belt squats, or maybe you switch to the safety squat bar for a while, something that doesn't require that external rotation and loading on the shoulders. With the bench press, maybe you quit maxing out for a little bit. You start doing some rep work, you lighten it up, maybe do a little bit of volume while you're strengthening up your shoulders and trying to bring a little bit of health to them. So it's important to constantly evolve your training based on what your current needs are. If you're getting ready for an event or you're preparing for a sporting competition, your training is going to look a whole lot different than if you're trying to rehab some injuries, or if you're taking a little bit of time, to help strengthen up some weak areas and things like that. So it's really important, to not, start building one of these everything in the kitchen sink type programs. Make sure you pull stuff out to accommodate for newer things as well. If you're going to do a lot of the shoulder rehab type work or the shoulder prehab type work, you might want to take out shoulder presses and side raises and things like that, and just focus on some of these rotation exercises, until your shoulders start to feel good, and then start working that stuff back in. So become very intuitive about your training. That's why I don't believe in following any specific program. I believe in learning the principles of training, then applying them to your specific needs, whether you're a lifter, whether you're an athlete, or whether you're training for health and fitness. And hopefully some of these exercises that I demoed today that we like for shoulder health and for shoulder strength and for the shoulder prehabilitation movements, hopefully you'll experiment with some of those, and hopefully they'll help you out as far as your training goes if you're dealing with some of these shoulder injuries as well. Again, this stuff works great for combative athletes whose shoulders are beat up, football players, people just general health and fitness, as well as weightlifters. So hopefully you got some good ideas from this video. If there's any topics you'd like me to cover in some future episodes, go ahead and leave those in the comments section below the video. And until next week, stay strong and stay healthy.